right, hey you guys, hey, it's your friend Kevin again out here in Portland, Oregon with Pedal PT. Again, Kevin Schmidt, physical therapist, bike fitter, owner of Pedal PT. Hey, want to get on here again. I had someone email me this weekend. Thanks so much for reaching out, you guys. Had Reese from Vail, Colorado, reaching out to me, asking me this. Could you possibly do a video on, I think, shimming for leg length discrepancy? Also, like I said, if you had too little of shim or too much shim, what would you feel? Okay, so that's kind of the idea. So I guess firstly, thank you so much, Reese, for taking the time to email. Glad you're enjoying the videos. And like I said, any of you guys that have questions, feel free to reach out. Like I said, it's your questions that keep this channel going. So in this case, let's talk a little bit about leg lengths, leg length differences. So I think in the first thing, like I said, when we talk about bike fitting, there's a lot of information out there about leg lengths. There's also a lot of different ways that we can manage leg length discrepancies on the bike, but let's kind of do a big overview. I'll try not to make this too complicated because kind of correcting a leg length discrepancy, if it's a true leg length discrepancy, there's a little bit of an art form to it. There's also a little bit of some science to it as well. So let's just talk about it. Let's unpack a lot of that. So first and foremost, so a lot of us have a difference in leg lengths and we don't even know it. Most of us, or I think they said something along the lines of 80 to 90% of us will have a leg length difference of a small amount. And by small amount, I mean maybe less than a centimeter difference. On the bike, a lot of times we can adapt and we can adjust fairly well. But for those folks that generally will truly have a structural, i.e. a true bony difference of either a long femur or a shorter femur, shorter tibia, that will result in a true leg length discrepancy. And a lot of times that's confirmed by an x-ray. Now, that doesn't matter right now. A lot of times when you're gonna get a bike fit, we're gonna check your leg lengths. So I'm gonna try to keep this real simple for you guys, but first and foremost, we usually don't have to worry about shimming or do anything special with the shoe until the leg length gets a little bit above about a centimeter. 12, 15 millimeters or so is when I'm starting to get concerned that leg length difference is really gonna kind of change things on our bike fit. The reason being is that commonly on our shorter leg, oftentimes that will make us reach a little bit farther at the bottom of the pedal stroke. So therefore it does affect saddle height. Oftentimes, what we have to do, if you have a true tibial leg length difference, or kind of the lower part of your leg, if your tibia is short there, commonly we will use kind of shims to raise the cleat, or we actually install something in between the cleat and the shoe to raise it up. Those look like these. These are kind of like little plastic shims, and basically what these are these allow us to basically make this a little bit taller, and then of course then the cleat fits on top of these guys. So we're not really doing anything to go side to side of like a varus or valgus wedge to bring the foot forward in that way. We're basically just stacking them up, so we're making it a little bit taller underneath the foot. That's oftentimes how we would correct a leg length difference, okay? So in the case, or Reese, to answer your question first and foremost, if you've got too much shim under there, a lot of times that will make you, at the bottom of that pedal stroke, it'll make your knee more bent. That would be akin to being saddled possibly a little bit too low. So oftentimes if you have too much shim in, basically that would result in saddle being too low type symptoms. That could involve being front of knee pain. That could even be kind of some hip pain. It just doesn't feel like you're able to straighten the knee all the way out, okay? Vice versa, if you have too little of a shim, that will make that leg reach further, or it'll be straighter at the bottom of the pedal stroke, which would be akin to maybe saddle being a little bit too high. Therefore, a lot of times we would experience pain kind of in the back of the knee or kind of hamstring area. You can sometimes even get saddle sores from this because if you're reaching at the bottom of that pedal stroke, the pelvis will rock and chase. And when that pelvis rocks back and forth on that saddle, you start to saw on that and you can start even getting some saddle discomfort as well. So in the pure case of just shims alone, if we're taking away the other things now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of open up Pandora's box about other ways that we manage leg length differences. But to answer your question, Reese, if you've got too much shim, front of knee pain, knee doesn't straighten out quite as much, too little of shim, you're gonna be stretching a little bit too far at the bottom. Now, to give you some numbers, a lot of times we have to balance this in between the involved side, or let's call it the shorter side, and the non-involved side. So for example, let's say we have a 15 millimeter difference in leg lengths, tibial difference. And a lot of times that what we usually will do is without any correction at all, a lot of times we would start by, as we say, we fit the short leg. What that means is at the bottom of the pedal stroke, it all comes down to how much that knee bends or how straight it is. Generally speaking, we're looking for a 30-degree knee angle at the straightest, maybe 28 to 30 degrees at the straightest. That's from 0. And that's the straightest we go. The most bent we want that knee is around the 35 degree, maybe 36, 37 degrees of knee bend at the bottom when the knee is at the straightest. So we have to kind of juggle that. Oftentimes I'll start by making sure that, let's call it the right leg is the short leg. Let's start by making sure the right leg is in the safe zone, or kind of the knee when it straightens, we're kind of in between 30 and 35 degrees. We then come to the other side. This is going to be your longer leg. We want to make sure that knee is not going any past, let's say 35 degrees. If it is, sometimes now because of the short leg, now it affects the other side, i.e. that side feels too low. So we have to sometimes kind of play that combination of let's make sure both knees at the bottom of the pedal stroke are within that safe zone. That's where, like I said, wedging comes in there. We can also, like I said, play around with saddle height is another way that we can manufacture or play with knee or how much reaching the knee is at the bottom of the pedal stroke. But again, we have to be careful that if we try to make it safe for the short leg, we got to make sure we're not making it disadvantageous for the other leg too. So you can kind of start to see where this becomes kind of a balance. We then can fine tune that. Like I said, we've got saddle height that can affect leg length or how much we're reaching at the bottom of that pedal stroke. The other thing, moving the saddle forward and aft will also affect reach. If you move the saddle forward, that would lower your saddle a teeny bit. If we move the saddle back a little bit, that effectively raises your saddle. Okay? It gets tricky with this kind of stuff. Another thing that we can do to kind of play with things is we can move the cleat around. If we move the cleat toward the toes, that actually lowers the saddle. Makes it so you bend a little bit more at the bottom of the pedal stroke. Vice versa, if we move the cleat back, that effectively raises your saddle. So you can kind of start to see how we can play a little bit. If we're adding just shims, we sometimes have to shim one side and then maybe make an adjustment on the cleat on the other side to make it kind of balance out. As long as both knees are close and in that safe zone of usually 30 to 35 degrees, you're fine, okay? Now, to complicate things even more, that's a lot of times when we're discussing when the short limb is the tibia. Certain cases or some sort of genetic things sometimes can lead us to having a short femur or a shorter femur than compared to the other side. In that case, oftentimes we will sometimes add a different length crank on that shorter side. I know, it gets complicated now. So now we're talking about just a little bit of a shorter crank on one side, regular size on the other side. So that would look something like this. Let's say perhaps you have a short right femur, making that leg shorter, making that reach more at the bottom of the pedal stroke. We have determined it's coming from your femur. So a lot of times we would put a shorter length crank on that side and then keep the original on the other side. So that could be something like we put a 165 crank on one side and the other side might be 175, something like that. That would be the maximum amount. You usually don't want more than about 10 millimeters difference between crank lengths. Otherwise, it's gonna probably feel weird. So sometimes we say play with maybe 5 millimeter difference. So maybe a 165 on the short side, a 170 millimeter length crank on the other side. We can then make those other little fine tunings sometimes either from saddle height, cleat position as well. Now, that's femur length. So again, if you guys got questions, please leave a mention on it. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible, but there's so many ways that we can attack leg length discrepancy. The last of which is sometimes people actually have a shorter limb as a result of sometimes things in our pelvis or sometimes developmental abnormalities or different things, different size pelvic bones. We've seen those before too. Sometimes when we have a pelvic issue, or let's say someone maybe with scoliosis, oftentimes what we're recommending with those guys is go out and get a Brooks saddle or a leather saddle. A leather saddle is interesting enough, as you ride on it enough, it will start to kind of break down. And ultimately after, a few 200, 300 miles or so, the saddle starts to kind of break down unequally, more on one side versus the other. But what that does, it allows the pelvis to level itself out, or leg lengths kind of equal out a little bit. So sometimes even the saddle that you choose, if it's leather or has the ability to kind of conform to your sitting bones, we can make up small adjustments in leg lengths that way too. So again, a lot of different ways that we can attack this kind of thing. The key is not to overcomplicate things. Base it off of the symptoms that you're having. Like I said, oftentimes that shorter side, you're going to sometimes develop back of leg things, back of knee, calf, sometimes saddle soreness, because a lot of times we're reaching too far at that bottom, okay? That would be the simple choice, would then be, let's just lower the saddle and let's just see what the other side or the other leg behaves like. If we have to modify and adjust that through the cleat to kind of take some pressure off it, we can do that too. So again, it's not a one size fits all, and sometimes it's a combination of maybe a little bit of shim, saddle positioning, maybe we get a leather saddle. All those different things should be able to allow you for the goal of keeping pelvis without rocking or sliding on that saddle. We got to keep you stable, and we got to make sure that those knees can extend fully to basically maximize the pedal stroke as well, okay? So again, a lot of information. Reese, for your question specifically about shims, if you're not touching anything alone and all you're playing with is shims, if you're too high, too much shim, you're probably going to get more symptoms of saddle being too low, i.e. front of knee pain, perhaps maybe some hip pain because the knee has to go a little bit higher at the top of the pedal stroke. If you've got too little shim, it's almost akin to saddle being a little too high. So you're going to reach a little too far. You're going to feel kind of discomfort, usually calf, back of knee, saddle sores, lower back things as well too, okay? Awesome. So again, keep those questions coming, guys. Leg lengths is kind of one of those things that we can get real simple or real granular with it, and it's a real case-by-case situation. And certain times we see people with very unique abnormalities. I had a client of mine once that she had roughly I think it was over 6-inch leg length difference, 6 inches, and that was a result of a congenital abnormality. She was born without her hip actually attached. Again, uniqueness of people. So the nice thing in the bike is, as long as we can get you stable, get you pedaling, there's a lot of different things that we can do. There's also a lot of adaptable equipment out there that we can use. Those just kind of give you some ideas about how to correct leg lengths, kind of the minutia, or maybe kind of the magic and the art form that's a little bit of this, a little bit of that to kind of get you the results that you want. So again, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. If you've made it this far, congratulations. Listening to me ramble on about leg lengths. Do yourself a favor, click like, give yourself a high five, maybe click subscribe. Again, it's your questions that keep this channel going. And so until next time, guys, thanks so much. Again, Kevin Schmidt, physical therapist out here in Pedal PT, Portland, Oregon.